Hi everyone. My name is Rachel Sterling. I'm 34 years old. My parents told me to cancel the final interview that could pull my marriage out of 8 months of one-income panic. Stay home and babysit my sister's kids instead. So, I turned off my phone, boarded the plane anyway. And by the time we landed, 57 missed calls were waiting for me, like proof that I had finally chosen the right emergency. The call came at 9:14 the night before my flight. I was at our kitchen table with my printed itinerary, interview notes, and a cold cup of coffee while my husband Liam ironed my blazer in the other room. It was the final interview, third round, Boston Regional Operations Director for a hospitality group big enough to change our whole year if I got it, maybe our whole life. Liam had been carrying us alone for 8 months after the marketing agency I worked for cut half the department. We were surviving just well enough to look normal while every private decision started sounding like math. Groceries got tighter, repairs got postponed, date nights turned into walks. No one never complained, which somehow made it worse. So when that interview came through, it didn't feel like an opportunity, it felt like oxygen. Then my mother called, not texted, called, which in my family usually meant one of two things. Either someone had died or my sister Vanessa had created a crisis and my parents had already decided my time belonged to fixing it. I answered on the second ring. Mom did not say hello, your sister needs you tomorrow. I stared at the itinerary. There was a little silence. Then that breath she always takes when she wants to turn my refusal into proof that I'm difficult. Rachel, you don't even know what happened. It doesn't matter, I have the final interview tomorrow. She knows that. Of course she did. Vanessa always knew exactly what she was asking me to ruin. She had 3 kids under 10 and a supernatural ability to turn poor planning into family obligation. Babysitters canceled, school closed early, her husband got stuck. One child had a fever or recital dramatic enough to mobilize 2 grandparents and still land in my lap. My parents called it helping family, I called it unpaid labor with emotional blackmail attached. What happened, I asked. David has a work dinner and Vanessa has no one for the kids. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because I had spent all week preparing for the most important interview of my adult life and my family was calling because my brother-in-law had a dinner and my sister had run out of backup women. Then she needs to solve that. Mom's voice sharpened. Don't talk like that. Like what? Like I'm a person with a life. That was when she changed tactics, softer, sadder, the martyr voice. Your sister is overwhelmed. There it was, the family spell. At 12, she was overwhelmed by homework, so I did dishes alone. At 16, she was overwhelmed by prom planning, so I drove across town to pick up her altered dress. At 28, she was overwhelmed by motherhood, so I spent Saturdays in her living room while she just ran out for an hour and came back after dark. I looked at the plane ticket again. Then, Liam walked into the kitchen, saw my face and stopped moving. He mouthed, "Who?" I mouthed back, "Mom." He closed his eyes because he already knew. Mom was still talking. "Family comes first, Rachel." "No," I said quietly, "that's what you say when you need something from me." She went silent. "Then I see now, your father is going to call." She hung up before I could answer. 30 seconds later his text came through, "Cancel it, your sister needs you, family comes first." I stared at the screen so long, Liam finally crossed the room, set the iron down and asked, "What did they do now?" I handed him the phone. He read the message once, then looked at me and said very calmly, "You're getting on that plane." Liam didn't raise his voice, that was what made it land. He set my phone on the table, pulled out the chair across from me and said, "Rachel, if you cancel this flight, they will remember one thing." I already knew, not that they asked too much, I said. He nodded, "They'll remember that it worked." That was my whole family in one sentence, not whether something was fair, not whether it was possible, just whether pressure got the result they wanted. I leaned back in the kitchen chair and looked at the ticket again. 6:20 a.m. departure, final interview at 2, return the next day if all went well. We had spent the last week preparing like it was a military operation. Liam had printed my resume on better paper. I had practice case questions in the shower. We had borrowed his cousin's nicer carry-on because mine still had a broken zipper from a trip I never should have taken to watch Vanessa's kids when she desperately needed just one weekend. That had been 2 years earlier. One weekend turned into 5 days. She and David went to a resort. My parents called it a misunderstanding. Families like mine survive on misunderstandings. They stack them so high you stop calling the structure what it is. Liam reached across the table and put his hand over mine. "What do you want?" he asked. Not what was smart, not what was fair, what I wanted. That question almost undid me because my family never asked it unless the answer happened to match their plans. "I want to go," I said. "Then go." I looked at him. "They're going to lose their minds." He gave the smallest shrug. They were already planning to. That was true. The punishment had been decided the moment I said no. Whether I stayed or went, I was going to pay. Going just meant paying for something that mattered. My father called 3 times after that. I didn't answer. Vanessa texted next. Seriously, you're choosing a stupid interview over your nieces and nephew? I stared at the message until anger burned the self-doubt out of me. Not choosing an interview over children, choosing my life over a system. Big difference. I typed back, I have a flight in the morning. You knew that? Her reply came immediately. Wow, that was all just wow. Because in my family, women like my sister never had to make full arguments. They only had to act wounded long enough for my parents to build the case around them. At 11:40, Mom sent one more text. If you board that plane, don't expect us to clean up the mess. I showed it to Liam. He took my phone, turned it face down and said, good, let them finally define the mess correctly. I barely slept, not because of the interview, because of the old guilt, the trained kind, the kind that doesn't ask whether you're wrong. It just hovers over any decision where you put yourself first and whispers that somebody somewhere is going to suffer theatrically enough to make your boundary look cruel. By 4:30, I was dressed, zipped into my navy blazer and standing in the kitchen with a travel mug, while Liam loaded my suitcase into the car. My phone lit up again as we pulled out of the driveway. Dad, then Mom, then Vanessa. I turned it off completely before we reached the highway. Not silent mode, off. That felt bigger than boarding the plane. Honestly, the airport was half business travelers, half sleepy families, rolling bags, bad coffee, overhead announcements no one really heard. And there I was at security trying to act like my heart wasn't pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with the interview. At the gate, Liam hugged me hard and said, you are not doing anything wrong. I nodded against his shoulder. Then he added, and if they blow up your phone all day, let them. A fire is not always an emergency. Sometimes it's just the sound of control not working. I actually smiled at that. Then I boarded. The flight was only 2 hours, but it felt like crossing a border I should have crossed years earlier. No one asking where I was, no one handing me snacks for Vanessa's kids. No one calling me the reliable one like it was a compliment instead of a trap. I spent the flight reviewing notes, touching up my talking points, and trying not to imagine the family group chat unraveling in my absence. When we landed, the cabin doors opened, phones came back to life around me, and mine lit up so fast it almost looked broken. Voicemails stacked in a flood, texts, missed calls, 57 missed calls. I stopped in the jet bridge and just stared. Mom 21 times, Dad 14, Vanessa 11, then a few from my Aunt Sarah, and one from my brother-in-law David, which meant the story had already spread. The first text at the top was from Dad. Call now, your sister had to leave the kids with strangers. My stomach dropped, not because I believed the wording, because I knew instantly it was written for maximum guilt, not maximum truth. Then I opened my mother's first voicemail. She was crying, not soft crying, performance crying. Rachel, what is wrong with you? Vanessa had no choice. She had to leave the kids with the neighbor. And Mia is terrified and asking why Aunt Rachel doesn't love them anymore. Call me right now before you make this even uglier. I closed my eyes. There it was. The real strategy, not we need help, punishment through children. Then a new text came in while I was still standing there, suitcase handle in my hand, from Vanessa. If I miss David's dinner because of you, don't ever ask me for anything again. And right under it, before I could even breathe, another message appeared from a number I didn't recognize. Hi Rachel, this is Chloe from Sterling Vanguard Recruitment. Mr. Vance is looking forward to meeting you at 2. Also, someone called the office this morning claiming you had a family emergency and might not show. Please confirm you're still coming. I called Chloe back from a chair near baggage claim. Hi, it's Rachel Sterling. I'm still coming. Her relief was immediate. Good. I'm glad you answered. Just so you know, the caller was persistent. They said there was a serious family situation and implied you might be in no shape to interview. I looked at the missed calls on my screen. My family creates a lot of serious situations the second they aren't getting what they want. There was a tiny pause, then she said carefully, Mr. Vance still wants to meet you. Good. I took a rideshare downtown, changed in the hotel restroom across from their office, fixed my makeup with hands that only shook once, and walked into Sterling Vanguard's headquarters at 1:48 with my portfolio under one arm and 57 missed calls, still burning a hole through my phone. The building was all glass, brushed steel, and expensive restraint. Quiet lobby, sharp receptionist, the kind of place where panic has to dress itself properly before it gets admitted upstairs. Chloe met me in reception. She was younger than I expected. Fast-moving, neat navy dress. The face of a woman who had already salvaged 6 other people's poor planning before lunch. Still want coffee, she asked. No, good answer. That made me like her immediately. She took me up to the 12th floor and walked me into a conference room with 2 windows, a carafe of water, and 3 people already seated. Mr. Vance in the middle, gray hair, rolled sleeves, the kind of man who looked as if he had never once confused noise for leadership. Beside him sat a regional finance director and an operations VP with a yellow legal pad full of handwritten notes. Vance stood when I entered. Rachel, he said, shaking my hand. I'm glad you made it. I held his gaze. So am I. He motioned for me to sit. Then before anything else, he said, I want to acknowledge the unusual call our office received this morning. There it was, no pretending, no dance. I took a breath. My family did not want me on this flight. The finance director's pen stopped moving. Vance leaned back slightly. Because of the interview, because of what the interview represents. He said nothing, so I went on. They needed free childcare. I said no. My parents are used to pressure working faster than respect. That could have gone badly. Could have sounded messy, personal, emotional in the wrong way. Instead, Vance nodded once and said, all right, then let's talk about how you handle pressure when it doesn't get to choose your priorities. That was the moment I knew I still had a shot. The interview was hard in exactly the right way. Not trick questions, real ones, a labor cost crisis in a high-volume property, an underperforming GM with strong guest scores and weak controls, a staff retention problem during expansion, a property owner who wanted luxury optics on mid-scale numbers. I answered all of it calmly, clearly. Not because I was superhuman, because 8 months of surviving on one income while my family kept treating my time like a public resource had burned all the decorative language out of me. I had no energy left for fake brilliance, only usable truth. At one point Vance asked, tell me about the hardest operational reset you've managed. And without planning to, I said, any system built on one person silently absorbing too much eventually collapses. The trick is catching it before everyone mistakes dependency for normal. No one spoke for a second after that. Then the operations VP wrote something down. We broke at 3:10. I stepped into the hallway, checked my phone, and found the family had moved from outrage to collapse. Mom 6 more voicemails, Dad for text, Vanessa 14 messages, unknown number 2 missed calls. The unknown number was my neighbor back home, Mrs. Higgins. I played that one first. Rachel, honey, it's Ellen from next door to your sister. I don't know what all this is, but your mother dropped the kids with me for an hour and it's been 4. Your niece is crying, the little one threw up, and your dad just drove off angry. Call someone. I stared at the wall, then I laughed once under my breath. Not because children throwing up at a neighbor's house was funny, because there it was, the whole truth. They had not needed me because no one else could help. They had needed me because everyone else in the family had finally been forced to do it once and immediately started falling apart. Then my phone buzzed with a new text from my father. If you don't fix this today, don't bother calling this family yours again. I looked at it, deleted nothing, saved everything. Then Chloe appeared at the end of the hall and said, Mr. Vance would like another 30 minutes. He's canceled his next meeting. The second half of the interview did not feel like an interview anymore. It felt like a test of whether I could stay clear while chaos tried to leak in through the walls. Mr. Vance closed my resume folder, folded his hands, and said, let's assume you get this role. You'll be overseeing properties across 3 states, inherited staff politics, underperforming managers, owners with unrealistic expectations, and at least one emergency every week that arrives labeled urgent but is actually just loud. How do you decide what deserves your attention first? I did not answer immediately because I knew the honest answer now, not the polished one. The real emergency, I said, is usually the thing no one wants named clearly because too many people benefit from the confusion. The finance director looked up. Vance said, go on. I did. People call something urgent when they want speed without accountability. I start with what keeps repeating, what only one person has been absorbing, what falls apart the second that person steps away. That tells you where the system is lying. No one interrupted, so I kept going. If a business only works because one manager fixes everything at midnight, that's the emergency. If a family only works because one daughter cancels her life every time someone panics, that's also the emergency. There it was, not a full confession, but enough. Vance's eyes did not soften. I appreciated that. Men in leadership who get sentimental too early usually mistake empathy for judgment. He just nodded once and said, that's the best answer I've heard all month. I wanted to hold on to that sentence. Instead, I focused on breathing normally. The last 30 minutes moved fast. Compensation ban, travel requirements, relocation timeline, whether Liam would be open to a move if it came to that. I answered everything cleanly because once the truth has already cost you your family for a day, a salary conversation stops feeling intimidating. At 4:02, Vance stood. Rachel, he said, I don't make offers on adrenaline, but I do know when I've met the right person. Chloe will be in touch by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, not vague, not we'll circle back. Tomorrow morning, I thanked them, shook hands, and walked out with my bag on one shoulder and my phone suddenly feeling heavier than anything in it. The first thing I saw when I switched it back on was a photo from my mother. Not of the kids, of my sister's living room. One of the boys asleep sideways on the couch in yesterday's clothes. One crying in the corner. Juice spilled on the rug. A lamp knocked crooked. The kind of photo designed to make female guilt travel faster than context. Under it, my mother had written, "This is what your selfishness caused." I stared at the screen so long. Chloe touched my arm lightly and asked if I was all right. I looked up, then I laughed. Not because because that message told me everything. I had not caused the mess, I had just refused the assignment. Big difference. By the time I got back to the airport hotel, the story had widened. Aunt Sarah had texted me that Vanessa left the kids with Mrs. Higgins for just a short dinner window, then got stuck because David kept drinking and Dad drove off angry after a fight. Claire, my sister-in-law, had apparently cried in the driveway because she never agreed to all this. Kevin, my brother-in-law, had gone home. My mother was now trying to frame the whole thing as a freak scheduling collapse no one could have predicted. Except I could have, because I had been predicting it for years. That was the whole point. Family systems built on one woman's endless availability look stable right up until she disappears for 12 hours. Then suddenly everybody discovers what she was holding up. At 6:30 Liam called. His voice alone made my whole body unclench. How'd it go? I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, shoes still on, and said, I think I may have just talked my way into a new life. He went quiet for half a second, then, good, because your family has absolutely set fire to the old one. I told him everything, Vance, the second round of questions. The photo from Mom, Mrs. Higgins, Dad's threat, Vanessa's meltdown, the office call that morning. Liam listened the way good men do, without grabbing the story away from you and making their anger the main event. Then he said, Rachel, do you understand what happened today? I looked at the hotel wallpaper because sometimes a blank surface helps truth arrive faster. They couldn't function without me. Yes, he said, and more important, they finally had to watch themselves try. That stayed with me. Not because it was profound, because it was accurate. My family had always treated my labor like background weather, constant enough not to mention, necessary enough to assume. But the moment I didn't cancel my flight, the whole machine sputtered in public. Children left with neighbors too long. Schedules blown, tempers exposed. Other women dragged in, my father storming out, my mother crying, Vanessa unraveling. They had always called me dramatic, now the performance was theirs. At 9:14, just as I was about to shower, my father sent one last text. If you take this job, don't expect us to pretend you didn't choose career over blood. I read it once. Then I wrote back the first completely honest sentence I had ever sent him. No, I chose my life over your convenience. He didn't answer. For the first time ever, neither did I. I got the offer at 8:07 the next morning. Not an email, a call. I was standing in the hotel bathroom with one earring in, and my hair half dried when my phone lit up with Chloe's name. I answered on the second ring. Rachel, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. If you're still interested, Mr. Vance would like to formally offer you the regional operations role. For 1 second, I just stood there holding the phone and looking at myself in the mirror like the woman on the other side of it might know what to do faster than I did. Then I said, yes. Not dramatically, not tearfully, just yes, because some answers deserve to arrive clean. Chloe went over the numbers: salary, bonus structure, relocation support if needed, start date, benefits. Then she said something small that almost got me harder than the offer itself. For what it's worth, Mr. Vance said, your answer about systems built on one person silently absorbing too much made the whole room sit up. I laughed quietly. Good, I said, it took me long enough to learn it. When the call ended, I sat on the edge of the bed and called Liam first. He picked up immediately. Well, I looked out the window at the gray Boston morning and let myself smile all the way for the first time in months. I got it. He made this sound, not a yell, not a laugh, something better, relief with joy under it. The kind of sound people make when hope has been costing them more than they admit. Then he said, I'm so proud of you. That almost undid me more than the offer itself. Not because I doubted him, because my family had spent so many years turning my usefulness into obligation, that hearing someone be proud of me for choosing myself still felt new enough to hurt a little. Then my phone vibrated again. Mom, of course. I let it ring once, twice, then I answered. She was crying before I said hello, real crying this time, I think. Not because she had suddenly discovered my pain, because the whole family system had started collapsing in ugly little domestic ways. And now my absence had texture. Rachel, she said, your sister is a wreck. I looked at the hotel carpet and closed my eyes. Not congratulations, not how did it go. Not even are you okay, straight to Vanessa, I got the job. I said, silence, then weakly, that's wonderful. It was the kind of sentence people offer when they know they missed the moment they were supposed to mean it. I waited. She went back to the real point anyway. Your sister and David had a terrible night. The kids were upset. Mrs. Higgins is offended. Your father and David got into an argument. Things just spiraled. Yes, I thought that's what happens when nobody can quietly hand me the whole thing anymore. Mom, I said, do you know what's interesting? She sniffed. What? No one in this family fell apart because I got on a plane. They fell apart because for the first time everyone had to handle the life they kept calling manageable. That shut her up. Then she tried one last version of the same old trick. We needed you. No, I said quietly, you needed access to me. I let that sit. Then I said the thing I should have said years ago. If Vanessa needed childcare, she should have asked before my flight, respected my no and solved her own emergency. What she actually needed was the old arrangement where my plans could be moved like furniture. My mother cried harder at that. Good, not because I wanted to punish her, because for once I was not the only one being made uncomfortable by the truth. My father texted while I was still on the phone, so that's it. You get some fancy title and forget who was there first. I actually laughed because if there is one thing men like my father love, it is acting like chronology equals sacrifice. As if having been there first means you get to keep taking. I said to my mother, I need you to hear this clearly, I'm taking the job. I am not apologizing and I am never again canceling something that matters to me because Vanessa waited too long to solve her own life. She whispered, you're being harsh. No, I said, I'm being expensive. That was the difference now. My time had a cost again, my plans had weight again, my life was no longer the family overflow room. I hung up before she could start crying in circles. The fallout took about a month to sort itself into its real shape. Vanessa sent 29 texts over 9 days. Most of them were about stress, loyalty, and what kind of aunt abandons children. I didn't answer any of those. I answered only once when she finally wrote, I guess I thought you'd always be there. I replied, that was the problem. After that, silence. My father stopped texting when he realized threats only sounded pathetic next to an offer letter. My mother kept trying small messages, weather, recipes, a picture of the kids coloring, little domestic breadcrumbs meant to lead me back into the old path without ever naming what had happened there. I ignored most of them, not cruelly, carefully, because distance is not the same thing as anger. Sometimes it is just the first wall your life has ever had. And Liam, he took me out for cheap tacos the night I got home, lifted his plastic cup and said to boarding the plane. I laughed so hard I nearly cried because that was it. Not the salary, not the title, not even the missed calls. Just the fact that I had finally walked toward the gate instead of back toward the crib. The juice boxes, the neighbor handoff, the family panic, the old seat with my name already assigned to it. People ask if getting the job felt like winning a little. But the real victory happened earlier at the gate when I turned my phone off. That was the first moment the future sounded louder than guilt. If you made it this far, tell me in the comments, would you have boarded that plane too? Or would you have stayed and helped your sister one more time? And after seeing your whole family unravel the second you chose yourself, would you ever go back to being their automatic solution? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for being here and I'll see you in the next. Disclaimer. This video is created for the sole purpose of entertainment. All situations, characters, and stories in this video are fictional and are built entirely using artificial intelligence technology. We hope you have a relaxing time.